Hello everyone and welcome back to your Heroclix headquarters. Today it's Power of the Week and we were asked to cover Force Blast next, so that's what we're going to do. And of course, as always, to figure out what that does, we're going to start by taking a look at our handy dandy pack. And we will be looking under the speed powers for the purple power Force Blast, which says here knockback, which gives us the knockback key phrase. And then power, roll a d6, a target adjacent opposing character is knocked back equal to the result. So let's go check it out on the map in action. Alright, so as we can see here, our Iron Rick figure has Force Blast as indicated by the purple square on his speed power. Now to use Force Blast, we first need to give him a power action, give him his action token, and then roll a single d6, like so, and then knock them back an amount of squares equal to the result. So in this instance, he'll knock back 3 squares, 1, 2. Now, if there is a wall here, then he won't be able to move back any further, and he'll be dealt knockback damage, which will click his dial once for knocking into the blocking terrain. Now if we were to roll just a 2, he would only be knocked back 2 squares and stop right here and not have to go back any further, therefore he wouldn't be stopped by the blocking terrain and wouldn't take the 1 knockback damage. Now if both figures were right here when we rolled for his Force Blast, then he would fall into the next square. If your knockback path crosses a square of higher elevation into lower elevation, then you immediately stop and take 2 clicks of knockback damage. So you'll click him 1, 2. Or if you didn't want to roll knockback as a power action, it gives you the key phrase knockback, which lets you have the choice to add knockback onto any of your attacks. So if in this instance Iron Rick wanted to make a close attack on Cyclops, you'd give him his action token to make his close attack, roll your dice, hit his defense value, dealing his 2 printed damage, 1, 2, and then choosing if you want to deal knockback. In this situation, I would, because falling off of elevated terrain would deal an additional 2 damage, like that, which is a really good way to deal a lot of damage. Alright, but what if we were to go against a character that had a damage reducer, such as toughness, invulnerability, impervious, or even invincible? You could take the power action to roll your d6, and in this case we'll be knocking the back 5 squares, which will knock him back all the way until he hits the wall again, but this time he has a damage reducer, so he will actually not take any damage. Just like if it was damage from an attack, you can reduce knockback damage if you have a reducer. Alright, but what if we wanted to attack a character that clicks onto a damage reducer? In this instance, if we were to make our close attack hit doing 2 damage, and then choosing to deal knockback from the attack, stopping him on that wall, normally he would take the 1 knockback damage, but since he clicked on to the power toughness, which reduces all damage by 1, he will still reduce that knockback damage by 1. So it's important to note that knockback damage is separately applied after damage from the original attack. So in this case, if Cyclops didn't have a damage reducer, he takes full damage, but then after you've turned his dial and knocked him back, then any knockback damage he would take would be reduced by any damage reducer he has. And it may also be important to note that with knockback paths, knockback must always go in a direct line. So for those odd angles like this, where it's not quite exactly a direct line like this would be, if you were to make your attack hit, click him as 2 damage, and then apply knockback, instead of going straight, you're going to go on the nearest diagonal direct line, which would be this way in this instance. Of course, falling him off of the elevated train to deal 2 damage, which again in this instance could be reduced by 1 from his toughness. So now I want to talk about some of the good combos you can use with Force Blast. For one, Outwit is a good one. If Cyborg here was to outwit Leonardo's toughness and roll for his Force Blast, he could knock him back and actually deal him a click of damage from knocking him into the wall. Another good combo to have with Force Blast is Sidestep. Now, these are both movement powers, but a lot of characters have one as a trait or maybe both of them as a special power. So in Cyborg's case, he has both of them on his special movement power. So being able to sidestep into position and then roll your Force Blast to knock them back off of a ledge or into a wall or wherever can be beneficial. And sometimes much easier than making an actual attack roll. And speaking of making an actual attack roll, that is one of the best things for Force Blast, considering some characters might have 19, 20, or more defense. So if you only have a 10 or less attack, it'll be extremely hard to actually make an attack and hit these characters. But just simply rolling for Force Blast to knock them off of a ledge or into a wall to deal them some free damage is much easier than making an attack roll. Another good combo is any character with a long range that has Force Blast can make good use of it, so long as you're not shooting at a character that has charge or combat reflexes to ignore it. Shooting at a character that doesn't have any range or only has maybe sidestep to try and get in close is a good way of knocking them back even further out of your way so that they can't even make it close enough to you to attack you. If you just keep shooting them and knocking them back every time they try to move up on you, they'll probably be dead long before they can actually make it to you. Now, one of the main drawbacks of Force Blast is if you're going against characters that have charge or combat reflexes, then they can't be dealt knockback, so you don't have a way of actually pushing them away from you once they've charged up on you, and sometimes that can be hard to deal with if you're more of a range-based fighter. And also characters with good damage reducers, such as invulnerability or better, aren't going to take any damage. But in most cases, if you don't have an outwit on that figure or one of your support figures, it's going to be hard to deal any damage if you're just trying to use Force Blast. And unless you are one of the few characters that has a special that gives you Force Blast and Running Shot or Sidestep or something like that, having it as a movement power by itself isn't usually great because you will have to take one turn just to move up and then another turn to try and roll for Force Blast if you were just trying to use the power action version of it and not just the knockback that it generated. Alright, so on to looking at some of my favorite characters that can use Force Blast. Here we have Iron Rick from the What If set. He's got a special that says when Iron Rick knocks back an opposing character, any damage from that knockback is penetrating damage, and after actions resolve, give that character an action token. And he does have Force Blast, his whole dial there. So now that's a much better version of Force Blast, actually being able to do penetrating knockback damage and giving an action token when you don't even have to make an attack roll is crazy. And then another one in the Iron Man family is Peace Machine, who has traded Force Blast, and when he does, he may target opposing characters within 3 squares in line of fire. So being able to target characters that aren't adjacent with Force Blast can be a really good way to keep people at a distance, especially when you're more of a range-based character. And again, that outwit and that sidestep combos really well with it, being able to sidestep within 3 squares of somebody, outwit their, maybe their charge or their combat reflexes or any damage reducer, and then knocking them back is a really cool combo with him. And another fun one is Quicksilver from the Age of Ultron movie set. He can use Force Blast and Hypersonic Speed, and he does have a 14 movement to start with, that Hypersonic Speed, and then later on he clicks into a special that gives him Flurry and Force Blast. I just really like having the Hypersonic Speed with the Force Blast, because that way you can zoom all around the map and get right into position where it would be the best way to knock them back. Even if you miss them with the attack knockback, maybe next turn you want to sit there and just roll the Force Blast. Now, Cyclops has always been one of the best Force Blasters in Marvel in general. This one from the Wolverine and the X-Men set has Force Blast and Sidestep as a special movement power, and having that nice 7 range was always fun, or being able to sidestep and Force Blast somebody off of ledge is always great. This other one has Force Blast and Running Shot, and when he uses Running Shot after actions resolve, he can use Force Blast as a free action. Now that's mainly good because he has the Sharpshooter, which lets him make ranged attacks against adjacent opposing characters, so you can actually Running Shot into adjacency with somebody and then Force Blast them, and if you Running Shotted them, you could knock them back into a wall and then free action Force Blast them into a wall again. So that one's always one of my favorite Force Blasters. And then finally we have this newer Cyclops here that has a trait Force Blast, and Cyclops may knock back opposing characters that can use charge or combat reflexes. And he also can make ranged attacks while adjacent to opposing characters as well. So that's a really good way to keep back even the charging type characters, which is really great with his Running Shot and Penetrating Blast and his long 7 range. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, he has Force Blast, Phase Teleport, and Sidestep on his special movement power. He also has that Outwit and Penetrating Blast, so that can really help you get through anything you need to be knocking people back. And he just makes a lot of really good combos with his Force Blasts. And then we have the new Red Tornado that has a trait that lets him use Force Blast. Charge and combat reflexes can't prevent knockback of opposing characters within 3 squares of Red Tornado. And now that's for anybody, not just his own Force Blast, so that also helps your friendly characters knock people back. And he does have 3 range, so that helps his own range shots as well. And finally, we have this older Red Tornado who has a trait that can use Force Blast normally or as a free action. When she activates Force Blast, after actions resolve, if the target character is still adjacent to her, deal that character 1 penetrating damage. Now this is really great if you manage to Force Blast somebody into a wall adjacent to her for 1 damage. Then if they remain adjacent to her, they'll still take another penetrating damage. So without even having to make an attack roll, you could deal somebody 2 damage just by keeping them adjacent to her and a wall. Alright, and finally we have some Ninja Turtle figures here. So to start with here, we have Leonardo from the Fast Forces set. This one, when Leonardo attacks a single opposing character with a close attack, after actions resolve, he can use Force Blast as a free action, and the target is given an action token if it doesn't have one already. So it's really cool to just charge up on somebody, and then, knock them back, potentially into a wall, and if they didn't have a token, he can give them an action token as well. So lots of bonus effects. And then both this Leonardo and Donatello do the same thing, so I'm just going to read one of their traits real quick. They both have this trait, Throw Across the Screen. When Leonardo hits an adjacent character after resolutions, you may place that character into a square adjacent to Leonardo, then use Force Blast targeting that character at no cost. This was from the video game Ninja Turtle set. It's just a really cool way of hitting the character, and you pick them up and you throw them across the screen and deal hopefully some knockback damage. Or just move them out of position can be really good too. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for this edition of Power of the Week. If you learned anything, or if you'd like this video, go ahead and leave me a like. And in the comments, go ahead and let me know if you have any more questions about this power. I'll do my best to answer them for you. And while you're there, feel free to nominate our next Power of the Week. And as always, don't forget to click that subscribe button for me so you never miss a video. Until next time, this has been Heroclix Headquarters, signing off.